Hi, thanks again for joining us here at Recopani.tv. I'm KK Diaz, and today I'm sitting with Chris Hart, one of my heroes. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Thanks for making the time.
My pleasure, KK. Yes.
I'm going to let you do the introduction. So please tell our audience about who you are and what you do.
Right, as I say, my name is Chris Hart. I work as an investment strategist at a company called Investment Solutions. I've been at it for about almost 8 years now, and before that I was with Absa Capital as a senior financial economist in the dealing room, working through financial markets and the economy. Before that I was a science teacher, so that was quite a big career change, and that was more than 15 years ago now. Part of what we do at Investment Solutions is in fact invest pension money, but our speciality is researching managers and placing money with managers in a multi-management type of strategy. So that's our speciality in knowledge, but of course in that we do need to understand the financial markets in the context of what's happening economically, and that's basically what I look for. I do research into Africa amongst that, and also look at global economic trends as well as local economic trends.
Great. Interesting. Sounds like an interesting job.
Love it.
Thanks. Chris, now tell us a little more about CPG, which is Citizens in Partnership with Government. Tell us more about what its mandate or objective is and pretty much why it was founded.
Well, I was approached by Becky, who's already formed what they call CPG Holdings in there, and asked to chair what they're forming as the Business Council. And certainly my view of organizations, etc., is that we've got enough of them. All right, we've got Saki, for instance. It's a superb organization. We've got Busa and that, but to a large extent they fill a role, but there's something missing, because I think in a sense we've got what I call a trust gap between government and business. In fact, the Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has actually outlined and described it as a trust deficit between government and business, and I don't think it's been wider. And yet at the same time, when I engage with people with government or even in business, I do pick up what I will call a sincerity surplus. In other words, there's people in government who really are striving for what they think will be the best for the country, and likewise in business. They want the best for the country, and yet there's this trust gap. How do we actually bridge that? And I think organizations like Busa and Saki can struggle to come up with a common purpose, because they've got very disparate constituencies within, and you don't want to offend that one at the expense of that. For instance, can Saki take a position on the rand? Should it be strong or weak? If they say no, we should have a strong currency, the exporter constituency might take exception to that, whereas the importers would take exception if we say we need a weaker rand. And that's just a simple thing, and I don't think business has one voice. I don't think government has one voice either. There's also various differences between even what different government departments say, even what different ministers are saying. And I don't think it's helpful to try and find an organization to try and come up with one voice. Because the moment you start to come up with one voice, you have to have polite meetings. You have to actually dilute what you have to say to something that's meaningless. And I actually believe what we actually need is forums where we can actually engage with people and do not have to agree. We don't even need to try and convince the other side of ours. In other words, we don't need to evangelize. Okay, what we need to do is start to understand where you come from and where I come from. And we do not need to agree, but if we've understood where we come from, we may at least say, maybe there's an alternative way. If we do something like this, we can meet our needs and you can meet your needs. and do that. One of the things I've said is that we also need to be mindful is that whether it's business or whether it's government, all of these organs exist to serve people, and people must be the ultimate beneficiaries. Because the moment a business becomes an end in itself, then we've lost something. The moment government becomes an end in itself, we've lost something. We've got to be very careful that government doesn't come and say, we have got a problem, and it's a government problem to solve for government. And other people must make, and other stakeholders must make sacrifices to solve government's problem, because it's not, then government is becoming an end in itself. But business can also become an end in itself. We saw this during the global financial crisis, too big to fail. I mean, where have you ever heard of such rubbish? In the sense that they're now saying we are an end in ourselves. Society, government, etc. must serve us, not us, society. That's why it's important to always keep in mind it's the end goal. Now, problems with formal organizations is that they can become power struggles, because the formal organizations often have their own unique vested interest, even though they're supposed to be speaking for government or for business as a whole. They have their own vested interest in their own right. And I'm really looking for business leaders and government leaders that are able to make a constructive contribution to a good discussion and maybe progress in terms of how we can improve policy, how we can improve economic outcomes. I'm not looking for somebody who's looking to launch their career or remodel their career. They must be secure in their own base where they sit, and they are able to actually be a statesman and be able to think above their particular industry or department or whatever, and say, well, this may be what I call best practice solution rather than a vested interest type of solution to a problem. So we do need to start thinking and rising above ourselves if we're going to come to solutions. And funny enough, you saw that whenever we've had leaders in South Africa which have risen above their own constituencies, South Africa has become a better place during those periods. So we take a look at the Mandela presidency. He rose above, and South Africa for that period was a better country for it. The moment it becomes sectarian, we deteriorate as a country. South Africa needs leadership where we actually rise above our sectarian interests. South Africa has always been better for it when we've done so. We just think back to our recent past, which was the characteristic of the Mandela presidency, is that, and that's why it actually worked. But even in the past, when de Klerk rose above his sectarian interest, it enabled a solution to at least start to be facilitated. When even in our past, when past Premier Jan Smuts rose above his specific constituency, ravaged by the Anglo-Boer War, etc., and helped to unite what, in the context of that particular day, South Africa was starting to be forged as a nation. Now, how we went back when he lost the general election in 1948, and the nationalists came in, and it became sectarian again, and South Africa started to rip itself apart again because of that sectarian nature. So we do need, because we're such a diverse society, to have people and leaders that rise above their sectarian interests. Yeah.
But Chris, thanks for that interesting perspective. But do we have enough of those kind of leaders? You know, is that part of our culture to step up and then work towards an objective that will fulfill the needs of the society at large?
You know, somehow South Africa has proven itself to be a resilient country. And our transition from the late 80s to the early 90s and mid-90s, I think is testimony to that, because it is nothing short of a miracle. If you actually were to put South Africa in any other context, countries that are far more homogenous than us are tearing themselves apart right now, for instance, in the Middle East and even further afield. And so it's important that we recognize that,
And appreciate the diversity.
that we are a diverse country, and we've got to be very, very careful of slipping back into that apartheid mindset where you start the blame game and group identity over everything else, because we do have, I think we need to celebrate our identities. I don't think that's something we can ignore, and I don't think we should ignore it. But we've got to be very careful to say that we do have a rights-driven constitution, which means that rights are protected. And that's the importance, is that they're protected over the, you could say, mob rule of a majority.
Thank you. And so how do ordinary South Africans or business people get involved with CPG? Or as you were saying earlier, that you're looking for a specific profile or criteria? Well,
firstly, it's people who are prepared to give time and expertise, people who are able to actually understand the issues and rise above their particular sectors, people who are secure in their own on their own platforms, that they don't need another platform to launch their careers or whatever, because that creates dissension and problems. I think it's also where we can actually identify real problems that we can turn around. South Africa is a country that is economically a high potential country. It's got an economy that is unsatisfactory in the sense that an enormous pool of people do not have proper access to the economy. And yet it's an economy that can produce abundance. We need to say, how can we take sector by sector? How can we take even at top level ways of improving things, and how do we improve thinking about things? For instance, if we want to, and very often this is a problem that we see with policy, is that policy is often designed to resolve a particular problem, sometimes real or not. And in doing so, it creates spillover effects and other problems, negativities.
The results
so
that you want to avoid.
For instance, our most recent is Department of Home Affairs wants to curb child trafficking and comes up with a visa system, from hell. The intention is actually very good. We want to protect our borders, all of that, right? But we want to grow tourism. Okay. Now, to grow tourism, you need to be the easiest country in the world to visit, not the most difficult. Right. So now, which is the more important priority? Okay, is job creation more important, or whatever issues that the Department of Home Affairs is trying to actually resolve? And I would suggest this is part of the problem that we've seen with government, is that unemployment has been pushed down as the lowest priority of government, not by intention, but by deed, what is actually being done. And so we get the Department of Home Affairs, we want growth in the economy, but it won't come from tourism, right? Because tourism will just stagnate and even go into decline, and we're going to look back in 5 years' time and say, my gosh, what on earth went wrong? And this is where you can say, can we make better decisions? Now, South Africa's economy has gone into stagflation condition, high inflation, low growth. It's the sick man of the emerging markets. Okay. Its growth is down, inflation is up, its debts are up. Okay. We're one of the few emerging markets where unemployment has risen since 2008, when the global financial crisis hit. And the evidence is all pointing to, it's not external factors that have made us an underperformer, but internal factors, decisions we took ourselves. We did it to ourselves. which is good news and bad news. The bad news is if you continue down the same path, you'll continue with the slow puncture. But the good news is we don't need to worry about what's happening in the US. We don't need to be happy. Those do impact, of course they impact, but to a large extent, the prosperity, success of the economy lies within our own hands. We can make decisions and fix what we have made, mistakes that we've made. One of the reasons we have such an enormous unemployment problem is that during the apartheid years, the corporate sector outgrew the economy. But being isolated, they couldn't expand their footprint elsewhere. So the economy became incredibly concentrated. So one of the spin-offs, we've got superb corporates. We really have superb corporates, and we saw that during the global financial crisis. They all stood up. Not one fell on their face. And that was unlike you saw in Europe and US, where iconic corporates fell flat on their face, needing bailouts or failed altogether. But in that consequence, small and medium enterprises have been squeezed out of the economy. And we have then subsequently compounded the problem with three fundamental mistakes. So in resolving the problems that government has identified, unemployment, inequality and poverty, right, we're making three fundamental mistakes. The first is labour unrest. Right, I agree, labour needs to be protected, okay, from their employers and from their unions. Funny enough, both need to be both are exploiting, I think, the workers. But we've protected our labour force out of the global economy. In other words, they're so protected they just can't be integrated into the economy. Right, and we'd land up with an unemployment rate that we have. In other words, labour unrest is the first big mistake. Nobody in the whole wide world invests into labour unrest, not even the unions themselves. Okay, the second big mistake is regulation. We're busy piling on regulations, layers and layers of very complicated, unwieldy regulation, often imported from offshore, because they're doing it in the US and UK. We're going to do it here.
Yes.
And what it does is all of them require economies of scale to be compliant with, which is exactly what small businesses do not have. All right, and because it's so costly, it means that instead of investing in growing a business, you're investing in compliance. Your resources are being drained into compliance. So that's a growth industry, and yet the economy is dead. The life is being sucked out of the economy as a consequence. And we need to fix that. We need to look to be a haven from the regulatory trends offshore, not emulated. And that means it helps, water runs downhill. Capital gets attracted to attractive destinations. Okay, and South Africa's got enormously well-developed financial markets which can attract investment, and we have attracted investment, but we can't let that go, because if it goes, we're going to see problems with the rand. The third big mistake is taxes, right, is that we've got a low savings rate, and people need to understand the economic linkage, because this is very important, is that firstly, all wealth in society is generated by some sort of business or enterprise activity. Okay, no economic activity comes into existence without investment. Okay, and all investment is funded by savings. Okay, so we've got to actually get back to the thing that savings is at the core of our unemployment problem. Okay, and so when you've got taxes that target saving and investment viability, I don't care whether those taxes exist in every other jurisdiction in the world. We can't have them here. So we should not have capital gains tax. We should not have tax on transfer of property and dividend taxes and taxes on interest earned, etc. Because all of that affects our ability to accumulate capital, which is what savings is. Savings is called capital formation in economic terms. That's exactly what it is. And the capital needs to be embedded in households, because it's out of households that you get small business funding. You do not get funding for small business out of these national things like the IDC and the NEFs and youth development or whatever. That is not where it happens. It comes from households. Ask any spaza shop, ask any micro business, ask any small. Usually the bond off the house or whatever funds is the seed capital that starts the process. So if you're busy taxing these things, it's like eating seeds and expecting harvests. Okay, so these are things that we need to correct. The trouble is, I'm not sure if the thinking is there at all.
Whose responsibility is it to have that conversation? Do
I
we leave it to government, or do we?
You can't leave it to government, because government's not coming up with these things. They're coming with higher capital gains taxes, etc. Because the thinking is not there. They see it as, from a tax point of view, a useful tax,
Yes.
but it's from an economic point of view exceptionally destructive. Okay, and that's basically what we need to start addressing. We are capital deficient with enormous unemployment. If you had full employment and abundance of capital, maybe you can have a different discussion, but we don't have that. And so you need to actually see how you can actually structure it. And these are things at top level that you can do, but at industry level you need to have a discussion on how you're going to grow tourism. We need to if job creation is the most important priority, and I believe that's what we should do, that's the national scar we need to deal with. If job creation is the most important priority, we need to say, well then, if that's the most important priority, what's NERSA trying to achieve? Okay, however NERSA structures its issues, it needs to structure in a way that job creation is more important than the other issues it's trying to tackle. And ICASA and FICA and FIRES and Consumer Protection Act and Credit Act, etc. Job creation has to be the most important priority. And ironically, if you resolve unemployment, a whole lot of other issues diminish. They don't necessarily get resolved, but for instance, people who've got employment are healthier than people who don't have employment. You actually help diminish your health problem by full employment. You actually, people who are employed have got more resources to keep their kids in school for longer. You help to actually improve education. Okay. Besides the fact that we have an unemployment problem from which there's a poverty and inequality consequence. Okay. Or again, put another way, full employment means poverty and inequality will become diminished problems in the country. Not necessarily resolved, but certainly diminished. And unfortunately, when you devise NERSA as it is, whatever issues are important to NERSA, they've made job creation less important to those. Same with ICASA, same with FICA, FIRES, and you go through the gambit of all of them have made unemployment less important than the issues that they're trying to resolve. Same with the Department of Home Affairs, and that means you say, not by intention, but by design. Unemployment has become the lowest priority of government. All right. In the last 10 years, I don't think there has been any legislation that has been supportive of business and investment. All of it is trying to deal with funny issues, some real, some imagined. All right. And we've become less attractive. So when we look at South Africa as an investment destination, as a place to do business, we're just declining in global rankings in its attractiveness just by a little bit every year. So in the Global World Economic Forum, we're now 56th place. Last year we were 53rd, just a small decline. 8 years ago we were 40th. All right, for instance, ease of doing business, World Bank slipping down the ranking, the World Economic Freedom slipping down the ranking. Credit ratings slipping down the ranking, transparency, in other words, corruption, slipping down the ranking, press freedom slipping down the ranking. These are all things that we shouldn't be doing, and it shows in the figures. Rising unemployment, rising debt, falling growth, all of these factors simply are things that are reversible within our own power.
I guess when we do eventually wake up, it might just be too late.
No, I believe this is why we need to actually say, if it's within our power, let's start as citizens. As I say, we talk about a participative democracy. I'm looking for a platform not where we agree, where we can come up with a common statement or anything like that. Forget it. We actually need to engage and understand that these are critical issues. And it's no good us having polite meetings where we have a lovely meeting and a nice photo opportunity. There I had a picture next to the deputy president and I've have a nice smile, but my thought bubble says, good grief. Okay. We can't have a setup where you're devising policy where not even the policymakers making those policies will invest their own money into that setup. Can't do it.
It's unrealistic.
So effectively, blueprint, we need to start boosting our savings. That you need to actually say, is it our fault to go or policy's fault? Policy has made savings unviable because of taxes and where interest rates are and where inflation is. So we need to sort out savings. We need to translate that savings into investment into the economy. It means that we need to make this place an easier and a better platform to do business. We need to make sure that the business an investment that takes place actually does benefit people. Okay, that's an important one. Because otherwise, why do it? So that's your inclusive growth. It's important that growth is inclusive. But we need to fix things like education. Okay. And again, fixing education is within our own power. We don't need to depend on anybody else to do that. And in that helps to empower. We need to sort out the business environment so that small business is in fact more viable. If we need 10 to 15 million jobs created, that means we need 2 to 4 million new small businesses. Okay? That's what it is.
Yes.
The National Empowerment Fund will maybe do 100, maybe even do, let's say they do 10,000. They're certainly not going to do 2 to 3 million. That's the households. Okay, and that is a critically important thing. And we need to find ways, as the National Development Plan says, crowd in private investment. Because again, we need that to form the tax base. And again, we're not in business to provide a tax base. Right. In other words, the government's not an end in itself, but of course, without resources, they can't function. And we need them to be able to function. They function properly. So we need spending in government to improve. You can't have to let them take 100 rand out of our pockets for them to deliver 25 rands worth of services, because it's diluted through inefficiency, corruption, and maladministration. We've got to fix those things, but these things we can actually work together. All of that helps to reduce the effectiveness of capital in this economy.
Chris, there's another conversation happening in the media, and I'm not sure if it is driven from government, but there's this conversation around 100 new black industrialists over the next few years. What is your take on that, and what are you hearing around those in that conversation?
Yeah, so us 100 new, specifically black industrialists, does that mean industrialists of any other race are not part of a solution, or are they part of a problem, right? Which is part of the sectarianism that we need to get away from, right? Because that's what got us into trouble in the first place. Okay, the second thing, 100 black industrialists. Let me think. In the context of 15 million unemployed, we do need to chip away at the problem, but to me that's a drop in the bucket. In other words, it's trying to say we need to find 100 people who are going to win the lottery. Okay, how's that going to help? So I would be thinking, how do we create 100,000 industrialists?
Is that not even a bigger...
Okay. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, we need to say, if we need to be creating 15 million jobs, okay, we need to start working backwards from there. 15 million jobs. If it's small businesses, we need 2 to 4 million new small businesses formed, okay, etc. And that's why I'm saying, if you want to start solving the problem, rather than doing things that are what are called prestige projects and that kind of thing, ribbon cutting ceremonies, etc. 100 industrials, I have a funny feeling we need to be thinking of 100,000. Okay, in other words, it's just a factor that's out by many noughts. And that's what I'm saying. So in a city of Johannesburg, you say, how many new businesses do we need in Johannesburg? Where's the actual town planning to resolve the unemployment in Johannesburg? And what is Bloemfontein doing, right, in terms of their planning to resolve? You're not going to get it other than through the formation of businesses. All right. What are we doing to lower the cost of doing business so that your hurdle rates come down and more positive decisions are made? Right. We need to be doing that.
Yes.
Because if you've got a high cost of doing business, then there's a whole lot of things that are not viable, and you create problems as a consequence.
Thanks for that, Chris. Now, what do the rest of us then do to contribute to that conversation? Do we wait and hopefully CPG will represent citizens to government, or do we, are there things we can start doing ourselves?
Yes.
In the meantime?
Yeah, KK, I think the one thing is I don't want to see, and I'd like to call it a platform like CPG, to be seen as representative. Okay? We're not trying to be representative. We're trying to get active citizens who want to make a positive and constructive contribution to good discussions that lead to improved outcomes, improved economic and business outcomes that are beneficial. I don't want to say mutually beneficial, because that means there's only two stakeholders. It needs to be beneficial on a multi-stakeholder basis. In other words, society must benefit, and government must be able to see benefit from that, and also business needs to be able to see benefit from that. And that's the point, is that it's about people taking initiative. Okay, and we can help facilitate in industry-specific projects. And I would say there's an issue, an example again is Department of Home Affairs and their visa requirements. This is an issue where we as a society need to say what do we want and what do we don't want, and what do we prefer over, and grade it, because things are grey. It's not as if that there's a right answer and a wrong answer. But if we're going to prioritise unemployment and tourism being a key driver of helping to reduce unemployment, then we have to then say the whole ability of people to enter the country needs to be changed. I don't have a problem if you say, I want to come to South Africa and I want to stay here for 15 years. We better check you out properly.
Sure.
But if you want to visit for 2 weeks, I think you arrive at the airport, we smile, we stamp your passport and welcome you in. All right. It doesn't help to say we're going to have draconian measures at a formal border post, because the experience in Africa is the more difficult it is to go through a border post, the more people that go around the border posts. And then you say, well, what's the point then anyway? So you're doing in many instances, it's an own goal. And we've got to be careful of scoring own goals. All right, things like exchange controls. If we, as a financial services institute, want to, for instance, launch a product that's dollar denominated for Africa, we can't do that in South Africa. You've got to go to Europe or Mauritius or whatever, but South Africa exchange control doesn't allow that. And you think, if you want to be a global financial center, or even an African financial center, these are laws that are so counterproductive. And so we say, if they're counterproductive in that sense, then we've got to say they must provide benefit in another sense. We then need to understand that benefit and agree as a society that's the benefit we want to the detriment of something else. These are choices we make. There is not necessarily one right answer versus another right answer, but certainly we're getting the wrong answers by not prioritizing. And so we do need to do that.
Folks, I don't know about you, but I'm taking a few nuggets away from this conversation, including the fact that we as citizens of South Africa need to be active citizens and participate in the conversations that will help take this country to the next level. And secondly, what I've also just realized from what Chris is saying is that we've pretty much created the situation that we're in today. And the good news about that is we can fix that problem. So it's about joining hands, it's about being active and actually joining in the conversations, and then the follow-up actions that needs to happen in order to take this country to the next level. Thanks again for joining us. Chris, thanks again for spending time with us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Till next time. Cheers.